Welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast, LawVu's community for in-house legal professionals. LawVu's mission is to accelerate the evolution of the in-house legal profession, and with this podcast, we showcase modern legal leaders from across the globe. We explore their unique journeys and how they're driving the transformation of our new profession. Join David Lancelot, LawVu's Chief Legal Officer and Executive Vice President of Advocacy, as he explores the cutting edge of in-house legal leadership. This is the Legal Leaders Podcast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast. I'm David Lancelot, your host. I'm the CLO and EVP Advocacy at LawVu. I have the great pleasure to have with me here today Chip Gentry, who is the CLO of Quaker Windows Doors. Chip, it is awesome to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here, Dave.
So Chip, first of all, why don't you tell us where you are in the world for our audience?
Yes, we are in mid-Missouri, so sort of the middle of the middle, and in a little sleepy town of Freeburg, Missouri, just south of the state capital, Jefferson City. And we have three separate plants. We have our residential plant here in Freeburg, the original location, and just a little bit south of us in Vienna, Missouri, we have a glass plant. And then over in Eldon, on your way to the Lake of the Ozarks, we have our commercial facility, which opened 6 years ago. We moved all of our commercial activity over there, about 150-acre campus, and pretty impressive, the rate of work growing.
Yep, absolutely. And so for everybody listening, this is a company that makes windows and doors, pretty much the entire, like, I don't know if you call yourself like a verticalized, you do the whole chain of production, right?
We do. And we're one of the few that pride ourselves on not just being a one-trick pony. We have a residential division. We have a luxury division within that, which is a ton of innovative products and repurposing some of our higher-end commercial products to luxury homes. And then we have our commercial division. And then as far as our vertically integration component is, we have our own glass plant and do our best to rely on the supply chain as little as possible, even though that's a key component of our success.
Sure. Yeah. So you actually make glass in Missouri, put it into window frames and other components that I don't know enough about to say anything smart, and
yes,
and build the whole product, basically.
We do. We design, we fabricate, et cetera. We buy our glass from a vendor, but then we create the insulated glass units internally.
Gotcha. Okay.
Cut it down ourselves, all those things.
And then ship all over the world, I assume?
All over the United States.
All over the United States.
We do not ship internationally at this point.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. So I mean, I'm sure I've seen houses with Quaker Windows and Doors here in California. I'm sure they're everywhere across the country. And I think it's really interesting. Manufacturing in the United States is such a hot topic, I guess you could say, these days. I mean, it has been forever, but it's an important topic, and it's just great to see that a really complex manufacturing process can take place in Freeburg and Vienna and across the great state of Missouri. Yeah, and Chip, we met, I think, for the first time in person at a legal leaders retreat in Chicago, which you were kind enough to come to. And I just knew, there's some people who just have a personality where I'm like, man, I got to get this guy on the show. So you were kind enough to join us. I think one of the other things that sort of, this, no pun intended, got on my radar was that you fly around in your plane, right? And I think,
that's correct.
For people that live on the coasts of the United States, maybe people that don't live in the US, it's not like everybody has a plane, but it's not that unusual for people in sort of the middle of America to fly places, right?
Yeah. It started for me. There's a longer story. The short version is I was at that stage of life with where I was at in my career, had my second child, and was doing well, et cetera. And I was going to buy a couple of motorcycles, and long and the short of it is there's just a very small list that my wife has vetoed in my life, and motorcycles was one of them. And for all the right reasons. I like to see how fast things go. I'm a dramatic risk taker. And I'd like to think I do it calculated wise, but when I got the no as an only child, I was a little upset about it. So I decided to take up flying. And it was within the first month of doing that, I started recognizing that I could actually bring that into my career
Yep.
and access clients and business opportunities far more efficient and compete with the big box law firms. Because the one main Achilles heel of living in mid-Missouri is it's very, very challenging to fly commercial without having a 3 to 4 hour lead time to a commercial airport.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and I mean, unless you've flown across the United States multiple times, it's hard to comprehend just how damn big it is, right? It's just
Right.
huge. And getting around, especially as you say, between airports that aren't directly connected. I'm actually going on a trip to Nashville. I need to meet my family in Hendersonville. And it's much faster for me to drive the 4.5 hours than to try and fly between those places that are probably an hour apart by plane. So
I'll be there this weekend.
yeah. So yeah, that absolutely came on my radar. No pun intended. Yes. So I think we should start with your journey and where you're at now, right? Like the business that you're at is a family owned business.
It is.
Uh,
77 years old.
well, yeah. And you know, I've met some GCs at family owned businesses, and it's very large ones like yours. And it's certainly a unique situation, right? Can you tell us a bit
It is.
about that?
Yeah. Do you want me to start with my journey of how I came here full
Yes,
time?
please.
Yeah. So what a journey it's been. I think the place to start for me is that I had a very challenging childhood, had substantial things happen to me, and I got to see what I would consider the underbelly of the human condition and how people treat each other and how they behave behind closed doors and when others aren't looking. And by the time I came up to Missouri in 1980 as a junior high student, there was a particular gentleman that was always in the basketball games and the track meets and the football games. And I just kept observing that administrators and teachers and parents and business owners in the small town that I went to high school in were always gravitating towards this gentleman. And it didn't take me long to learn that he was the one trick pony small town lawyer. And I was just in awe of it. Seemed he was always in the middle of all issues and decisions and challenges and struggles. And he was always looking for solutions and creative solutions at that. And I think that was a key component as to what led me to think, well, I want to be that kind of a person. I'd like to take what I've learned, sometimes having to grow up a little too soon and learn things that you would hope maybe a kid wouldn't have to learn, but nevertheless, it's just the journey you're on. And that led me to really take academics seriously and push my way all the way through law school. And through law school, ironically, people would ask me what type of lawyer did I want to be? And I'd always respond, well, a corporate lawyer. And in hindsight, I would say that simply because I thought it sounded good. And it's because I had no idea what kind of lawyer I wanted to be or where I wanted to practice and in what type of capacity I wanted to practice. And so I was super blessed with some really cool opportunities working for a court of appeals judge, working for a small, basically a smaller firm in Columbia, Missouri, where University of Missouri is located. But they were like the go-to firm in the community. And then I went to a big box law firm in between my second and third year law school. And while I was intrigued by it and with what they pay kids coming out of law school, it's hard not to get wrapped up into those golden handcuffs. But I just knew from a culture perspective, access to clients, being able to control my own destiny, it wasn't really the chapter I wanted to open. And so I ended up getting a job in Jefferson City, Missouri at what was the largest outstate Missouri law firm at the time. It was an Eat What You Kill program. So it was one of those places where you better be comfortable jumping into the deep end. And the irony there is like I taught myself how to swim, and I taught myself how to swim at Boy Scout camp by literally jumping in the deep end, having no idea what to do or how to do it. And it took me a couple of years, but I figured it out. And same with private practice is, you get this linear concept. And I think between the law schools and big box law, and maybe even what you see on TV, you just assume that it's going to be a 10-year plus process to try to make partner. And I was never bootstrapped to those types of assumptions and habits that others had fallen into. So I just got after it and really took my job serious, worked my tail off, and tried to be indispensable to as many partners as I could. And lo and behold, 3 years later, not only did I make partner, a year after that, they made me the managing partner. And
Wow.
so, I brought a prop, Dave, because I'm a golfer. It's my main hobby. My son's trying to make it on the pro gig.
Wow.
And in 1998, this is a footnote for any aspiring law student or young lawyer, is that just make certain you maximize the opportunities to meet people, to find out who can be in your circle that will help you be a better person, work on your empathy, your kindness, your approachability, your inclusiveness, all those things that we as a culture and we as the human condition need more of. Because in 1998, I was invited to a little community golf tournament in Osage County, where Freeburg, Indiana is located. And I was a terrible golfer. I'd only been golfing for a year. And as a golfer, you would never not only want a trophy, but would not display a trophy if it was C flight. That's a barely passing grade. But I have the Osage County Community Center event golf tournament Flight C champion. And the reason it's important to me is that I had just happened to meet at that golf tournament several of the Knoll brothers. The Knoll family owns Quaker Windows.
Oh, wow.
My law firm at the time had helped the family out with some pretty minor things in the grand scheme of things. In the 50 some odd years they'd been in business, they'd never been sued. And lo and behold, about 6 months after that, they got themselves into a challenge that spanned the country, spanned hundreds of sites. And it was a bet the company type of risk exposure.
Still drafting contracts the hard way? With LawVu Draft, your team can create, review, and finalize contracts faster, work smarter, stay consistent, and reduce risk. Start your 14-day trial today at lawvudraft.com.
And lo and behold, instead of going to big box law in St. Louis or Kansas City that they had dabbled with, they liked my approach, they liked my energy, and so they contacted my firm and asked if we could help. And frankly, I was out over my skis, but I jumped in with both feet like I always do. And we figured it out. And while it took a few years and a whole lot of learning lessons along the way, we, helped save the company, helped learn from those challenges and really empowered them for their next chapter of explosive growth. And so I not only represented them over the next few decades of my career, I got into the fenestration industry and started speaking to the industry, started meeting other manufacturers and other leadership, and really planted myself deeply within the industry and had no expectation or thought process one time of ever going in-house or being a chief legal officer or being a general counsel. And when the last brother of the Knoll family died 12 years ago, I had asked him and his wife, as he was struggling with some health challenges, as to whether or not he wanted a legacy or he wanted the company to be sold. And he said, I want a legacy. And I said, so my friend, we have some work to do. So we helped restructure the company to allow for a sea change event of the first non-family member coming into a leadership position as the CEO. And that's where Kevin Lancelot took the helm. And boys, he crushed it. And he brought his empathy and his drive and his positive attributes to the table. And lo and behold, in 2024, we started talking about a variety of things, and he made a run at me. And as they said of The Godfather, made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and just made it make a whole lot of sense to where in this next chapter of my career, after almost 30 years in private practice, it made sense for me, for my family, most importantly, for the people that work here and the company as an enterprise, because of not only our explosive growth, but moving from that 77 years of tribal knowledge. And I mean, our lead engineer has been here for 50 years, and that's like the norm here. Right. And so taking all of that vast knowledge and the experience and the wisdom and transferring it into standard operating procedures and processes that we can now leverage moving into the future. And so that's what kind of drove me. The people were the number one reason why I said, these are the type of folks I personally want to be around. I want to be held accountable. I want to be pushed, and I want to be in a circle where I'm trusted and that people will listen, but nevertheless push back, and it's not just a circle of people saying yes all the time. So that's the shortest version of how I can help the listeners and the viewers understand how I got from a small town kid watching the local lawyer talk to all the folks about their issues and challenges and find solutions, moving through private practice and litigation, and leaving the litigation primarily and coming in-house to help an enterprise really work through that change management.
And I think I would say business person with legal skills,
Yes.
humility and curiosity, which gives you the ability to move. And this is one of the fascinating things for me, Chip, when I met you and we're talking, it's like, I don't know that many people who've been a litigator for decades who are able to come into a business, right? Like certainly from an in-house perspective, and maybe this is wrong, but, and I'm sure you'll tell me, there's lots of great litigators out there who are very flexible, but we would look at litigators and say, oh yeah, well, they're super aggressive. That's their job, is just to fight all the time, to constantly be finding issues to fight about. But clearly that's not your sort of mindset, your game. Yeah. So I think it's a fascinating story to build that relationship over time and then turn it into a really, top level business leadership role.
Yeah, I was very blessed, and I suppose it's part of my nature is that, I can be quite aggressive. And it's funny to me is that I hear other people talk about hearing about me, or they've been referred to me because they say, well, I hear you're a bulldog and you attack and you're aggressive and no holds barred. And that's absolutely true. Sort of like a boxing match. At some point in time, bell goes off and your opponent needs to be hit in the face. But that's not my nature, and that's not where I want to start. And so I've always had that real deep empathy to where law schools don't teach this. I don't think it's championed the way I think it should be. And that is, it's personal. If you hire me in private practice, your issue is my issue. Going to keep me up at night. Going to take some time for my family. It's going to take time for my hobbies, et cetera, because I passionately need to understand how it's making you feel, how it's altering your life and your decisions. And then I want to think as creatively as possible, what are all the options that are out there, some of which that the courts can't touch, and how do we get there if that's the best way to go? And so that's how I handled every single case over 30 years. And I just bring that in-house now. So if we need to, we can be super aggressive, but thankfully my day in, day out actions don't require that type of demeanor.
Yeah. And I think that's a great segue into, you're coming in from decades of litigation experience. And now I've experienced directly your drive to modernize and transform the in-house legal function of a significant manufacturing business, right? Like,
absolutely,
as we spoke about. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about how that became, where you got that from, even, right? Like, you don't think of long-term litigators as people that build, and I'm sure you'll tell me I'm wrong here too, Chip, but build processes and policies and operations and technology, et cetera, right? So why don't you tell us how you became that guy?
Well, part of it is I did own my own law firm for almost 12 years. And, when we set that law firm up, Dave, as a lawyer, I think you will agree that lawyers, for whatever reason, whether it's the weaknesses of the law school system, maybe it's just the type of folks that gravitate towards the law, we are traditionally, as a whole, not very good business people.
Yeah.
And I think about how long we all held on to the BlackBerries. I think about how long we all held on to fax machines, how we resisted email, and how I recall being when we opened the law firm, there was a speaker talking about going paperless. And I was pretty proud because that was how we set up our law firm. We were the first mid-Missouri law firm to go truly paperless. And we all raised our hands, and it was probably a third of us that had gone paperless. And he goes, well, congratulations. the business community has been paperless for a decade at this stage.
Sure.
So I do have the experience of trying to set up a well-oiled machine to be a speedboat and not a big tanker ship, and that type of creativity. And so, again, I go back to the people, and I've always said I bleed Quaker blue. It's our kind of corporate color. And I saw an opportunity with their massive explosion in growth and what the future held. And knowing what I know around the industry and the market availability, I thought, what a fun thing to do that would get me excited, get me up in the morning, get me motivated to try to do new things and use skill sets in an entirely different way. And so, one of the things I sort of required is that our general counsel needed to stay, because I knew what he did on a day-to-day basis. And I can tell you, he provided me a PowerPoint summary of what the legal department was doing prior to me coming on board. And it was 100 slides, 100 slides. And, only about 3 of those were litigation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew that we had to have a really aggressive team concept, and that we had to look at what we had been doing over the last several years and what opportunities had we been missing out on, because we sort of rinsed and repeated the old school way that in-house legal had been treated, and how in-house legal had treated those that they plug and play with, through the departments. And so I literally drew a diagram where I had the legal department in the center, and I had our commercial division, a residential division, engineering, marketing, IT, HR, our owners, the board of directors, our suppliers, our employees, our competitors even. And I just started drawing all these connections to show how all these concentric circles start to overlay. And I said, where these circles lay on top of each other, that's where our excellence could lie. And that's where this enterprise can really benefit from legal thinking. And we wanted visibility, and we wanted to change the old school way of being about 90% reactive, 10% proactive on its head, where we're 90%, if not more, proactive. And so we spent all of last year vetting. Obviously, AI is all over the news. It's part of our daily existence, and really getting educated on what opportunities were out there, vetting our current processes, what software we had, what we were using, how we were using it, who was using it, how the interface worked, and then literally started getting educated on all the options that were out there. And I could tell you, Dave, I was pretty blown away by the number of people that said they could do everything we wanted. And it ultimately got us to where, late last year, we got to where I had a grid so I could see what was actually going to work the way we wanted it, not just with contracts, but with matters, being able to get visibility across all the different departments and divisions, being able to create business interfaces so folks had dashboards. And the best part is an efficient way to access legal, and for legal to access everything that needs to be done in a systematic, repeatable way, to where if I don't show up at work tomorrow for the rest of this company's existence, someone could come into my place, see how we're doing it and the why we're doing it, and get up to speed very, very, very quickly, versus somehow trying to recreate the knowledge that I've built over the last 30 years. And so, what we were excited is that when we met the LawVu team, and by this time I could tell you I was a little skeptical as to who could do what. And it was the first and only team that really was patient with us, listened to our needs truly, authenticity wise, and walked us through a proof of concept, trial and error. So we could say, here's some examples of things that we're trying to improve, and really led us down the path to where we now are super excited, because I think we're maybe a couple of months away from graduation day of getting LawVu fully implemented. And it's going to revolutionize just how that circle I told you I drew now over a year ago, and all of the tentacles and the connections and those concentric circles, to where it's going to create that visibility. It's going to allow us to do things so much more efficiently. And this change agent kind of component is going to now be just the culture that we're all moving into together, rather than sort of dragging folks along, with the anchor.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful to hear, Chip. I mean, I think it's just such an interesting story for someone with your background in your location to be so sort of cutting edge in terms of like legal function leadership, right? A business leader with legal skills who recognizes that operations, process policies, technology, the people that run them are fundamental to the effective management and leadership of a legal function, right? I mean, it's just not a story you hear every day. And it gives me great hope that people all around the country, right, will be on the same and will be on the same journey. Because if Quaker Windows and Doors in Freeburg, Missouri, with Chip Gentry is doing it, right, like you have no excuse, right? You have no excuse
Right.
to not be a modern, effective legal function.
Well, you alluded to it, manufacturing, particularly domestic manufacturing in the States, it is a challenge. And between, administration changes and politics and geopolitical challenges and headwinds, it is not for the faint of heart. And you have to be, I've been in Washington, D.C. more in the last year than I was in the first 30 years of my career. And you have to be in the pool where these decisions are being made and have seats at the table and be in the room, because if you're just a spectator, good luck, because just keep reading the headlines. It's not going to get any easier. And our market in and of itself is relatively small in the grand scheme of things. And, the supply chains are vulnerable. And you look at a variety of competitors that used to be key competitors have now had to close plants and lay off people, and people are being bought up by private equity. And so our market is dramatically changing weekly. And so, if we're not being these change agents ourselves within, and then also trying to bring that energy out to the industry for certain sea change events, then not only will Quaker Windows suffer, but the industry will suffer, and then ultimately the customers. And it doesn't take a whole lot of reading or watching the news to see how housing is a massive, massive headwind. People can't afford them. People can't get the loans. The mortgage rates are still high. The inventory is at an all-time historical low. And if people are building homes or remodeling homes, our products have no need. So it's exciting, challenging, a little terrifying at times, but it's something to be really, really passionate about.
Yeah. And I think, your particular group of skills, right? The fact that you are I don't know what the right word is, highly experienced advocate, let's say, these days. Saying someone's seasoned sounds like they've been around too long. I'm quite seasoned myself, but highly experienced advocate who can walk the halls in pretty much any environment, right? And particularly in a political situation, which we're definitely encountering currently, as well as somebody who gets the value of modern leadership, right? Transformative leadership, people, processes, technology. And I think what it leads me to is you're thinking about both things at the same time in a way that is pretty sophisticated, right? Like you've got to build the engine room so that you can do the high value work that is what is the most impactful for your business, right?
Right.
If you
It's
were
the technical skills, that the law schools teach, but then it's the soft skills of just being a human. And at the end of the day, you have to be a good storyteller. You're going to be persuasive and influential. And by being a good storyteller, you have to still bring the data, the facts, the information. You have to do the hard work in the background. And then you have to understand who your audience is and try to get a handle if you're just meeting them for the first time. Again, with our technology we have available now, it's not too hard to find social media posts and how people portray themselves. It may not guarantee that's who they are, but it gives you a good understanding of what their hobbies are, what their interests are. Do they have kids? And, what's their favorite sports team? And just by using that little psychological storytelling gift of how do you connect with someone as quickly as possible? Because an old wise lawyer told me one time, look, all things, people want to do business with their friends. All things being equal, people want to do business with their friends. All things not being equal, people still want to do business with their friends. And so, why is it so hard for folks to just want to be friendly at a minimum as a starting point And then better yet, like when you and I met, I didn't know you from Adam, but you were friendly, you were empathetic, you were kind, you were curious, you asked great questions, and I was drawn to that. So it helped me very quickly, likewise, be vulnerable and share fears and concerns and challenges. And then we very quickly got into what can we do to make legal departments and the in-house environment that is in the sea change event better.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought Chicago and the Legal Leaders Conference was mind blowing to me, because how passionate everyone was. But the thing I really took from it is how vulnerable everyone was about the challenges and the concerns and the fears. And that's where the real change, that's where real growth occurs, not just individually, but within our departments.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, the work that you're doing, the lobbying work that you're doing, are you able to say some more about that? Like,
Yeah. So there's several, it seems like there's no, that the list continues to grow, but the one I'm most proud of, because it's the most challenging to me on a variety of levels, is if you had asked me 16 months ago what I thought about tariffs,
Mm.
what I thought about unfair trade, what I thought about all the different ways that tariffs can be regulated and imposed and enforced, I would have told you I know zero. And it became very clear to me in my role that not only getting in with our two main industry associations, working towards leadership roles, talking to the relatively new CEOs of those industry associations, and more importantly, our direct competitors, that we're all in the same room and we're trying to figure out how can we protect our industry and our share, our market share, so we can all compete. And it dawned on me that I needed to learn a whole lot about those issues. So I very quickly learned about, the Department of Commerce and International Trade Commission, United States Trade Representative, 232 tariffs, 301 tariffs, and all the different ways they can be, instituted, they can be regulated, they can be imposed, and then how to educate Custom Borders Patrol on what they need to be looking for, and folks' invoices from overseas and their bonds, and how folks cheat the system and try to do end runs around the tariffs they would otherwise seek. And so that's been really, really, it's just been an amazing journey in that I've had one-on-one conversations with direct competitors and their CLOs and their CEOs. And we've had discussions within the room as to what else other people are seeing as to how folks are cheating the system and unfairly competing in the domestic market and unfairly eroding it illegally. And so it's been this, I'd like to, I've told the folks here in our divisions and our departments that legal's goal is to educate so we can empower you so you can execute your mission for the enterprise in an efficient, aggressive, sea change event type of way. And so I'm taking that same sort of energy and concept within the industry and with our competitors and other members of these associations and the associations as a whole to educate them about the challenge. And I've also been the one to raise my hand and say, look, if this is the little boy who's crying wolf and it's just us that's experiencing it, let me know. And we're a year and a half in and not one single person has said I'm wrong. And now it's empowering them to actually make a change and build a coalition, a formal coalition, formal documents. How do you become a member? How does it get financed? How do we make decisions and vote on the action steps? And then most importantly, what tools do we have in this vast toolbox to actually do something proactively? Because 3 years ago at the International Builder Showcase, I understood there was about 2 foreign competitors that were exhibiting. In 2025, my first year going to the International Builder Showcase, there were like 20 something. And this past year in Orlando, there was an entire pavilion. So this is not going away. And the tsunami is here. And now what are we going to do about it? So I don't know how that story is going to end and how that chapter is going to close. My suspicion is it will be a ongoing chapter for some time. But the fact that the industry is now engaged is really exciting.
Yeah. And I mean, I have to say, unfair trade is not a partisan issue, right?
No.
Everybody believes that American manufacturing should be on a fair, level playing field with international competitors, and I have a feeling that the industry, and in particular your industry, will be very well advocated for by Chip Gentry. So yeah, I feel positive about that. And Chip, I got to say thank you so much for joining me on the show. It's been a real pleasure, and I really do look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Likewise, Dave. Always a pleasure sharing shots. Sharing. Let me back up and say that again. Always a pleasure speaking with you, Dave, and sharing thoughts and concepts and how we can just continue to grow.
Awesome. And thank you everybody for joining us on this episode of the Legal Leaders Podcast, and we'll see you all again soon. Thanks.